Hi everybody. I'm going to talk to you today about herbicides, government and people. Oh, there you go. Okay, but I'm going to start right in the beginning. So before we talk about herbicides, we have to go all the way back to pesticide use. That's the first one, yes. So how do we comply to the actual pesticide use? I'm not talking herbicides here, because remember, we do invasive species, we don't just do plants, we do animals as well. So I'm going to say, we'll talk about pesticide use and how we comply to international obligations. Because you do know the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment has got international obligations we need to comply to, as well as the other government departments like Department of Health, Department of Employment and Labour, and the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. So there's lots of government departments that have to comply to international obligations. Now the DFFE has to also comply to the Rotterdam Convention because we are the national designated authority for Rotterdam, and we're also the national designated authority for the Stockholm Convention, but we are not the NDA for the Basel or the Bamako Convention. That is the NDA of the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. So please keep that in mind as we go further on down the slides. Excuse me. So the Global Harmonization System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals and the Hazardous Chemicals Agents Regulations, those two go hand in hand. But the GHS is the international regulations, whereas the HCA are the South African regulations that fit into the global GHS regulations. And we need to comply to both of those. Now the HCA in South Africa was promulgated in March last year, and our date for compliance is October this year. But I heard that the compliance to most of the regulations is still October this year. The only thing that has changed is that pesticide companies have received an extension until September next year to ensure that their labels comply to the HCA and the GHS compliance with regards to the hazard criterion on their labels. Okay? And then also the biomonitoring protocols need to be implemented. In other words, if you are using a pesticide that falls within the chronic toxicity hazard criterion, which are criterions 3, 4, 5, and 6, you have to implement biomonitoring protocols. And then the PPE policy that we've now implemented falls in line with the FAO's pesticide policy for the African continent or for any country that is that falls within a tropical climate, so that we're not using PPE that comes out of a temperate climate like Europe, for instance, because the PPE does differ depending on where you're coming from. Okay, so the international legislation we need to comply to is the Rotterdam Convention that looks at prior informed consent under Annex 3, which helps countries make informed decisions regarding the import of banned or restricted pesticides. An example of this one is paraquat, for instance. Paraquat is listed under Annex 3 of the Rotterdam Convention, which means you cannot import it into a country or export it without notifying the Secretariat of the Rotterdam Convention, because it is banned. Sorry. Okay. The Stockholm Convention is a convention of the POPs, which are to eliminate and restrict the use of the pesticides of the persistent organic pesticides, and we have one that we still use in South Africa quite, I would say, widespread, especially in Limpopo, the northwest and northern KZN. Which one is it? It's banned, but we still use it in South Africa. Anybody? DDT, yes. So DDT is a POP, a persistent organic pollutant that we still use in South Africa, but restricted, and the only department that can use DDT is the Department of Health for indoor residual spraying for mosquito control in northern KZN, northern northwest and Limpopo provinces. But, and here's my big but, why are we still using DDT when there is a biopesticide registered for the control of mosquitoes? So that's my question. We could be using a biopesticide for mosquito control, but we're still using a POP for mosquito control in South Africa. The other one is the Basel Convention, which deals with the control of transboundary movements of hazardous waste and their disposal, which includes empty containers. Empty containers are not for use of carrying water, to water your plants, to water your animals. No, because there is a residual amount of pesticide in that container that you are going to be feeding into your crops, into your animals, into your wife, into your cat, etc. So any empty container needs to be triple rinsed and punctured and disposed of in the hazardous waste stream. Hazardous waste stream. i.e., you don't throw it away with your general waste, you don't throw it into a wasteful. So that's why it is dealt with under the Basel Convention. Then the Bamako Convention deals with the imports of hazardous wastes into Africa and the control of transboundary movements and management of hazardous waste, but also the stockpiling of near obsolete pesticides on the African continent. The Bamako Convention came into effect when African countries realized that European countries were stockpiling and dumping near obsolete pesticides on the African continent. So they were sending all their near obsolete pesticides to African countries to basically get rid of them because they were almost expired. And that's where the Bamako Convention came from. Okay, what you're looking at here is Okay, so you had, in the beginning, you had the World Health Organization classes of pesticides, which went from 1A, which had the red label, extremely hazardous, to the U label, unlikely to present acute hazard, which was blue or green. Okay, 0.25% of the population are red-green colorblind. So, and a large proportion of the South African population are illiterate. So what do you think happens in a large population of illiterate people that are blue-green colorblind? They will see an extremely hazardous pesticide and unlikely to present acute hazardous pesticide as one and the same thing. And globally, it was 0.25% of the global population are red-green colorblind. So the World Health Organization classes were changed to the GHS classes. The GHS classes are no more color-coded. There's no color bands on the pesticide labels anymore. There are hazard statements and pictograms. So you now have a hazard statement. So you have a category 1, fatal if swallowed, and a category 5, harmful, maybe harmful if swallowed. And then you also have the hazard statement, which might say fatal in contact with skin, or maybe harmful if contact with skin. And then you have the hazard pictograms, which will either be a skull and crossbones, if it is a chronic tox or an acute tox, or an exclamation mark, or a person if it's a chronic toxin, it's an inhalation risk that shows the lungs. So it is very different now, so that it's easier for the person who reads the label to be able to pick up what is the health risks of using that pesticide. Okay. What is the pesticide that has moved, if you're looking at the AR, oops, oh, now it's gone completely. Assistance, please. Let me just change it quickly. There we go. All fixed. So if you're looking at the ARC classification, which is the International Agency for Research on Cancer, we have one pesticide that has gone from probably carcinogenic to humans to possibly carcinogenic to humans, moved from a 2B to a 2A. Which one was it? Glyphosate. So you also need to know what your IARC classification is of your herbicide to make sure whether your herbicide is moving up the carcinogenic levels. To make sure if you know whether your pesticide is becoming carcinogenic. Remember, the pesticide doesn't stay in the same category for its entire lifespan. It might move depending on all sorts of environmental contaminants, environmental issues, environmental risks, etc. Okay, now you're a pesticide manager and you need to put together a pesticide policy. We're working on plant X. You go to the Herbicides or the pesticide supplier and you say, I need to cut down product X. And he says to you, no problem, use Climax. You use Climax for 6 months and it starts not working. You go back and you moan and you say it's not working anymore. And he says to you, no problem, use Hatchet. Okay? You use Hatchet 3 months, not working anymore. You go back and you say Hatchet's not working anymore. Give me something else. He says, no problem, I'll give you Spear. You use Spear and you're still worried. What is the problem? Why is it not working? Because all of the ones that he has suggested to you are all in the same high-rec group. So what are you doing? You are creating resistance of that plant species to that high-rec group. So if you keep using the same herbicide in the same high-rec group on the same plant species, you are creating a resistance of that plant to that high-rec group. When that plant is now resistant to group B, that means you can no longer use any of these in group B. What the herbicide or the Herbicide should have said to you is, if this group B is not working, he should have given you something. Remember, it has to be registered. He can't give you something that isn't registered for species X. Keep that in mind, please. I'm hypothetically giving you a hypothetical here that it is registered. Okay? He should have said, okay, well, you can't use any of these because they're all in the same high-rec group. You're going to create resistance. This one is also registered, but it's a different high-rec group. So try this one. Try Ubuntu. So if you are working on a pesticide management plan, do not choose all your herbicides in the same high-rec group, because you are going to create resistance of that species against that high-rec group. And when that herbicide resistance happens, you are up the creek without a paddle. Right, now we get to Act 36. Act 36 is the Fertilizers, Farm Feeds, Agricultural Remedies and Stock Remedies Act. Okay, it governs all registrations of fertilizers and pesticides, but not biopesticides under Act 36. Biopesticides are registered under another act. Keep that in mind. Okay, that's under Section 3. It governs the registration of pest control operators under Section 11, which means you cannot apply a pesticide without a PCO license. Ding ding. So how many people sitting in this audience are willfully and throwing and spraying herbicide out there without a PCO license? You're in contravention of Act 36. Act 36 also prohibits and regulates the importation, sale, acquisition, disposal or use of pesticides under sections 15, 7, 4, respectively. Okay? The registrar can cancel a registration, which never happens, under Section 4, under certain conditions, or make unscheduled visits under Section 15. So one of the pesticide managers, or the technical managers as they're called, can rock up at your site at any time and say, I want to see your paperwork under Section 15. I want to see everything. Where's your PCO license? What are you spraying? Is it registered? Is it on the label? Etc. etc. Okay? He can grant import permits under Section 16, and he can appeal imports and exports under Section 6. Okay, so the pesticide management policy was a pie in the sky that was gazetted under Notice 1120 of 2010, which was supposed to improve the legislative framework and encourage development and use of alternative products and techniques. It was also supposed to integrate relevant international agreements and initiatives and increase transparency, access to information, and public participation. This pesticide management policy never took off, unfortunately. Okay. But it was the basis, or a document that we used with many other documents to actually upgrade our pesticide policy. Now, here's the big thing that you need to look at when you're developing your pesticide policy, is pesticides with unmanageable risk. Because remember, it's not a robot that is applying that pesticide, it is a person applying that pesticide. So pesticides with unmanageable risk are the pesticides with endocrine disrupting properties, the EDPs, the persistent organic pollutants, the POPs, the carcinogenic and immunotoxic potential pesticides, the Class 1As, the highly hazardous pesticides, the Class 1Bs, and we have 148 of them currently in South Africa. Pesticides with frequent and severe poisoning incidents, the arsenics, Class 2A. We have one that people love spraying on cacti, which falls under pesticides with frequent and severe poisoning incidents. Which one is it? MSMA. So, no more MSMA, please, people. No more MSMA. Because it's a pesticide with unmanageable risk. Right. So, NEMA, National Environmental Management Act, encourages implementation of comprehensive pesticide reduction strategies. So the substitution principles promotes pesticides with lesser toxic ones and non-chemical alternatives. This is where we're talking about hierarchy of control, which we're going to get to later on, is how we use the hierarchy of control to implement our new pesticide policy. Excuse me. Review existing registrations. This should be done on a 5-yearly basis. That Act 36 should review all their registrations on a 5-yearly basis, and those that are pesticides with unmanageable risk, all the ones that I just looked at, showed you now, should actually be deregistered. Anyway. Waste management and waste management, including empty containers and obsolete chemicals, should be looked at and should become the responsibility of the national designated authority under the Basel Convention. So it should be Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development's responsibility. It is, but they outsource that to CropLife South Africa. So Act 36 outsourced the management of empty containers and obsolete pesticides to CropLife South Africa. So the next question is, how legal is that? But we'll get to that. Okay. And Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, let's just call it Department of Agriculture because it's a tongue tire, is responsible for herbicide or pesticide container management under Section 4.5 of the Basel Convention. Hence outsourced to CropLife. Right, our policy was updated in 2012 and is continuously under review. Okay, it covers all herbicides and pesticides. So now it's not just a herbicide policy, it's a pesticide policy, because we do animals as well. There are the certain ones, the pesticides with unmanageable risk, those ones are not covered in our policy. Those were eliminated when we instituted the hierarchy of control. Biopesticides are preferred. So we are looking at reducing the use of herbicides to the most sustainably, environmentally friendly pesticides, so those that don't have any chronic toxicity, as well as those ones, so there's no HHPs, there's no highly hazardous pesticides, there's no pesticides with unmanageable risk in our pesticide policy, and we prefer biopesticides. So where we can use a biological control agent, we do so, and where we can use a biopesticide, we do so. And there are agreed control measures, agreed with international best practice. Okay, so basically the spreadsheet, which is now currently on version 15, is a one-stop shop for invasive alien species control. There's 424 plant species, 40 treatment methods, 31 formulations, 53 herbicides, 7 pesticides, 13 biopesticides, and 3 herbicide categories, and 5 pesticide categories on the huge big spreadsheet that we have. Okay. On the spreadsheet, here's an excerpt of the spreadsheet, just the first piece. Okay. So it gives you all the herbicides that are registered and their doses, etc. And if you scroll to the end, I've done your work for you, and I've given you, once you've done your environmental social risk assessment, I've given you the recommended product. And the recommended product is the one that we've already done the ESRA on. So we've done the hazard criterions, we've done which one's the safest, etc. And it's in the purple column, but I'm going to make you work for it. So you're going to scroll through all the information first, and hopefully you don't just scroll, you actually read the information as you scroll. Hopefully, ne? So read the information as you scroll. Excuse me. Okay? So then, there it goes, and it will give you the safest one. Okay? But I do encourage you to do your own risk assessment, please. Okay, so our safety, we have a health and safety officer. Let me just put this a little bit away. We have a health and safety officer who does toolbox talks. But our toolbox talks are no longer you have to wear your PPE, you have to put your goggles on, you have to put your mask on. It's now, if you don't put your mask on and you're spraying, doing a foliar application with a hazard criterion 3, which is carcinogenic and it has an inhalation risk, you're going to get that stuff into your lungs and you might get lung cancer. That's the toolbox talks we do now. If you spray glyphosate without polyethoxylated teleamine, people, so we're not talking GBHs, we're talking glyphosate that does not contain polyethoxylated teleamine. Remember, there's 154 registered GBHs in this country. There's only 2 on my pesticide policy. We eliminated 152, we kept 2. Because there's only 2 that can prove that they are polyethoxylated teleamine free. So those are the only 2 we use. The other 152, we said thank you, go away. Because you cannot prove you are safe. Okay, so that's what we did when we did the hierarchy of control. So there's only 2 on the pesticide policy. But there is still a risk of absorption of the glyphosate through the eyes. So what is the biggest thing that you have to protect with glyphosate? Your eyes. So we say to them, when you are doing your foliar application of your glyphosate onto your aquatic weeds, we're not worried about your suit, we are worried about your eyes. So if you're not wearing your goggles, you're in trouble. Okay. And then, and this all came out through the herbicide toxicity research that we did in conjunction with UCT. And then our PPE, obviously I already told you, we've updated it in line with the FAO PPE policy for Africa, just to get in line with our other countries through our SADC agreements. And then a self-assessment and compliance auditing directorate, which is different to the implementation directorate, comes out and actually audits us on our own policies to make sure that we are in line with our policies. Okay, so what are our challenges? High rates of foliar application. Everybody does the Mexican way. So what is our highest risk that we have to mitigate? Is foliar applications. So what we've done is we've said where we can, we've eliminated foliar applications. Because if you cannot mitigate it, take it out. So if you cannot change the behavioral controls of the people doing the spray, then take it out. So a lot of the foliar applications we have now changed. If we can change it to another method, we've changed it to another method. So now we've also made it more labor intensive. There's a lot of other methods that we can use instead of foliar applications. For an example, I'll get into it just now. And then staff not wearing their PPE correctly. That's why we changed our toolbox talks, to tell them what is the risk if you don't wear it. Not just wear it, but what is the risk if you don't wear it. And we have seen an increase in the compliance of our teams wearing their PPE, because now they know why they have to wear it. It's not because we just, wanting to make them look like Darth Vader. We're getting them to wear their PPE to protect their health. And so it's basically just a behavioral change. And then herbicide companies not disclosing adjuvants in aquatic registered herbicides. And thankfully, with the HCA regulations coming into effect, if the adjuvant in the herbicide formulation is dangerous, carcinogenic, tetrotoxic, mutagenic, anything, if it is unsafe for human consumption, human health, etc., they will have to disclose it on their label. I.e., any glyphosate that has polyethoxylated taloamine will have to disclose on their label. Come now September next year, because they got an exemption to extend their label submissions, which I'm not happy about, but so be it. And that is a good thing. And it's not just the glyphosates. There are many pesticides where the labels have toxic co-formulants, adjuvants, whatever you want to call them, in. And those will have to now disclose the nasties in their formulations on the label, so that you know what toxic little soup you're buying to kill your plant. Okay, so what's the way forward? Is to mitigate the risk, and how you're going to mitigate that risk. Just to be clear on how, research outcomes for herbicide toxicity implemented, awareness of potential risks of herbicides, so a lot of these sort of get-togethers, and then utilize alternative measures where possible. So we started to implement biocontrol at a really boosted up level. Brashing. Brashing is a really good alternative for a lot of species, but it's labor intensive. So there's a lot of species that we can reduce or remove herbicide control completely if we brash, and then using fire as an alternative. Okay, hierarchy of control. So using the hierarchy of control in your method when you're looking at your pesticide policy. Engineering. So the engineering level in the hierarchy of control. How can you change the pesticide to make it safer? So we're talking to pesticide companies regarding encapsulation of their products and biodegradable type products. So instead of having to touch the pesticide or get into contact with the pesticide, to have almost like a no contact type thing. So almost like those Ariel washing powder tablety things. We're looking at those kind of pesticides kind of formulation efforts. With certain ones, we're also looking at granules with slow release for aquatics, etc., etc. And then ESRAs, environmental, social, risk assessments are important, that have to be done per active ingredient. You cannot do an ESRA for a landscape orientation. You have to do it for the active ingredients. So, and this I'm going to take you through an ESRA just now as a case study, and it's very easy to do. It's not, oh my word, I don't know how to do it. It's very easy to do an ESRA per active ingredient, because you need to know what that active ingredient is going to do in the environment. So you cannot do it at a landscape level. And then people don't consider simple things like biobeds. Biobeds to absorb pesticide residues. Biobeds in rivers to work as semi-mobile floating wetlands, etc., etc., for pesticide absorptions, for nutrient attenuation, etc., etc. There's lots of things you can look at. Exclusion zones, buffer zones. So when you're spraying, does anybody put out an exclusion zone or a buffer zone? No. So you just spray, but you don't think about the drift. No one thinks about the drift. You just spray. You should be putting out a buffer zone when you spray. And that should be in your risk assessment. Right, now we're going to do the case study. What fun. Okay, so we embarked on the elimination process in 2010. We eliminated 5 pesticides. So we looked at our policy and we said, right, these must go. One of them was MSMA, out. Okay, so we substituted 6 with safe alternatives. The first one was eliminate MSMA, substitute with Impala. Okay, so no more MSMA. So in 2013, we wrote a letter to all our service providers and we said we are banning. I'm sure Sandparks hated me. They called me, I think it was the Cactus Ninja. Or the Cactus, no, it was the Cactus Nazi. I was known as the Cactus Nazi back in 2013 when I said to everybody, I'm banning MSMA, gone, out. Brought in Impala, which is completely safer for cactus control. And now in the policy, you either, if it has got a biocontrol agent, you only use biocontrol if it's cacti. If the cacti does not have any biocontrol, you will use Impala. That's it. Those are your 2 options. If it's got biocontrol, biocontrol it. If it has no biocontrol, Impala, clump. That's it. Those are your options. For Turbidor, in the Northern Cape, they've got a species called Prosopis, and it covers the Northern Cape water wall, thick. And they needed to do something with this Prosopis, and they keep cutting it down. Now, Prosopis is groeiknol, growth nodule, is 5 centimeters under the ground. So you either dig it out and cut it underneath that thing, which is now about 7-8 centimeters under the ground. Who's going to do that? Nobody. So what did they do? They just kept cut stumping it. So all we had Prosopis that was just multi-stemming all the time, because it kept growing back up from its groeiknol, its growth nodule. It was under the ground, because we were cutting it above where it was coppicing from. So I said, and they loved doing garland and diesel. Diesel is banned in this program. Banned. No diesel applications if you are in any way connected to DFFE. I'm putting it out there because I've already caught 2. Just saying. So we took garland and diesel and we said, I need an alternative for garland and diesel. So we got Turbidor, and Turbidor is a ready to mix. It's ready mixed. You don't mix it with anything. If you buy the 5 liter, you take off the cap, you put it on your nozzle, off you go. Buy the 1 liter, you take the cap off, you put your nozzle on, off you go. Basal application. Basal application. No cutting. Basal. And it's not just registered for Prosopis, it's registered for many other species. So stop cutting stuff, just do basal applications. The thing will die on its own. The other one was kaput gel. We brought in kaput gel for herbicide assistance programs where people were moaning, we don't have the equipment, we don't have this, we don't have that. So we brought in kaput gel because all we give you is a 1 litre kaput little bucket and you buy the paintbrush, which is what? 10 rand? So all you do is you cut the thing down and you paint it on the stump. Okay, that was our suggestion for herbicide application programs. Then the other one was we needed a glyphosate aerial application for the Northern Cape as well, and for bush encroachers where they just would go in and spray all this glyphosate all over the place, which was starting to make my hair fall out. So then we said, no, we need something that replaced the glyphosate aerial applications. So we got Sendero. And Sendero is very, very environmentally friendly. The only problem is it takes 9 months. 9 months. So it is very slow, but it's very environmentally friendly for aerial applications. So it takes 9 months for the tree to be completely dead, but it takes 9 months. So for working for water programs, it's going to be a little bit tricky when it comes to checking the contractor, etc., but we'll work it back into the program. Okay, and we're currently working on engineering controls with formulation changes to try and make the other products safer, because everybody likes Garlon. I hate Garlon. The reason why I hate Garlon is it's a butoxyethyl ester which volatilizes at 25 degrees. Now, if you're using Garlon in the Northern Cape, that means 10 o'clock you have to stop using it. Then what? Because then it's already up in the air. So if you're sitting in a region where you've got a pesticide you need to use and it hits 25 degrees and now you can't use it anymore, what now? So we're trying to see if we can do different formulations with some of the pesticides that actually work quite well. Okay, so the steps taken to mitigate the risk and lessen the impacts needed to implement a new PPE policy and biomonitoring to monitor human health risks in line with GHS and HCA regulations. So there are some pesticides we still use because we couldn't take them out because there's nothing else to substitute them with. So for those pesticides, like Confront, we have to actually implement biomonitoring protocols. So the department has got biomonitoring protocols for certain pesticides which we can't at this stage take out, but they're on our take-out list. But we just can't take them out yet. Okay? And then PPE, people, is the last step to protect people from risk. The biomonitoring is also required is acute and chronic risk pesticides are used. So whether it's an acute risk or a chronic risk, depending on the pesticide exposure, so whether it is an inhalation or a dermal or even an ingestion risk, you still need to look at the hazard criterion of the pesticide. Okay, so we looked at the hierarchy of control. So there's where I said, physically remove the hazard, elimination. So those were the 6 we thought, okay, unmanageable risk. Remember those 6 criteria, the unmanageable risk? Those are the ones we eliminated. Then we had to substitute those 6 with something. And those are the ones I just told you about. So we replaced the hazard. So we substituted it. Okay? Now we have to, now we're looking at engineering controls. Isolate people from the risk. Now that's not necessarily just formulation changes of pesticides. It's also how to isolate a person from the risk. So now we're looking at other methods. So instead of maybe getting the pesticide operator to have the knapsack on his back and the lance in front of him and he sprays and he walks through the spray mist, to rather have a back. Yes, so have a knapsack with the lance at the back, and he sprays backwards and he walks forwards. So it's just the change of the knapsack and the lance that is attached to the knapsack at the back. He still pumps the thing and sprays, but it sprays backwards, he walks forwards. So that is the kind of engineering controls that you can do to mitigate the risks of the pesticide exposure and contamination. So it's just think a little bit outside the box. It's not always to have to change formulations of pesticides and that sort of thing. Just think a little bit outside the box on how to prevent the person being contaminated by the risk. Okay, and then the administrative controls is change the way the people work. In the Northern Cape, if it's hot and you have to apply a butoxyethyl ester and you know it volatilizes at 25 degrees, why not get them to work from 4 to 6 or 4 to 8 in the morning and then again from 4 to 8 in the evening? Then they're not working during the time where the risk is there. They're working outside the risk times. So that's the administrative type controls you can implement. Okay, and as you can see, PPE is right here at the bottom. Because who wears dust masks? Who puts dust masks on their people? What is a dust mask made out of? Cotton. Ne? Dust masks are made out of cotton. Cotton is 5 times more absorptive than just not giving a mask at all. So you are actually, that poor person with a cotton dust mask is absorbing 5 times more pesticide than a dude that's got no mask. Oops. Yeah. So basically, and cotton overalls, 5 times more absorption risk than no overall at all. So if you're going to put your people in cotton, rather put them in the field naked. Because you are giving their risk 5 times more by putting them in cotton overalls and cotton dust masks and cotton t-shirts than if they had nothing. Did you know that? No. And you wonder why your people get sick. You should not give your people dust masks. Dust masks. Because what is a dust mask for? Dust. Not pesticides. No. So you really should think when you put your people in PPE. Because the PPE has to be per hazard criterion and per exposure risk, which we're going to get to now. If you want to know what kind of PPE your people should be wearing, please download this document. Or just look at my PPE policy, which is kind of that document, but in South African talk, and our hazard criteria groups. But that is the basis of our PPE policy. Okay, right. So now, we're going to do the case study now, and if you get it wrong, no one gets lunch. Because then I know no one was listening. Remember, look at the species spreadsheet and choose the species you want to control. That's that big spreadsheet I was talking about. Ne? Then you look at the species registered for that, look at the herbicide or the pesticide, depending on the species you're talking about, whether it's an animal or a plant. Look at the pesticide registered for that species and recommend the safest pesticide or herbicide by ensuring you look at the hazard criterion for each pesticide, the human health and the environmental risks, and ensure that you mitigate with engineering controls, behavioral controls, PPE, and do a risk assessment. That is what you call a desktop ESRA. Or you could be lazy and scroll to the end, to the purple column, and look at recommended. But you're still going to be lazy there, because my recommended is for an overall recommended. It's not for a recommended if you spray near a river, because I recommend it for landscape. So if you're going to spray near a river, you're going to have to do your own risk assessment. Okay. So, here we go. You are doing a cut stump on a black wattle. What herbicide would you use if you are spraying next to a river with a group of women? Your team is female, next to a river, doing a cut stump application. Which herbicide would you use? I've already done your Ezra for you. There's your desktop Ezra. Now you must choose. You have 2 minutes, 2 seconds. 1, 2. And the answer is? Okay, let's start. First of all, you have women. Confront is out. Access is out. Okay, just for women, confront is out as access out because it has a criterion 5 is a developmental and reproductive tox, damage to unborn child. So confront is out. But confront is also out because HC8 is toxic to aquatic life with long-lasting effects. That's H411 is aquatic to toxic organisms with long-lasting effects. So confront is out on 2 criteria. Okay? He out. Access is out because it is an endocrine disrupting criterion and it's a HC7, so it's a has criterion 6, EDC has criterion 8, aquatic acute tox to aquatic organisms, and HC8, which is the same as there. So he's out on 3, has criterion 6, 7, and 8. So he's out on 3, he's out on 2. Plenin is out on 3. EDC, so has a criterion 6, has a criterion 7, has a criterion 8. So he's out on 3, he's out on 3, he's out on 2. Hatchet is out. Persistent in soil and water, harmful to aquatic life with long-lasting effects, has criterion 8, he's out on 1. Temporal is out. Has a criterion 8, H411, acutely toxic to aquatic organisms with long-lasting effects. Has a criterion 11, is out. What did you all miss? Biopesticide, stump out.
Am I scared of what?
You may.
There's no information for stump out. How do you know it's toxic?
There's no information for stump out because it does not have any hazard criterion data. Because it's a biopesticide, it does not conform to any hazard criterion data. There's no hazard criterion data for stump out. So it's not, it doesn't have any hazard criterion information. So in other words, it doesn't fall in any of the hazard criteria. There's 10 hazard criterions. Hazard criterion 1 is international conventions. Hazard criterion 2 is acutely toxic to mammals. Hazard criterion 3 is carcinogenic. Hazard criterion 4 is mutagenic. Hazard criterion 5 is reproductive and tetrotoxic. Hazard criterion 6 is EDCs, endocrine disruptive chemicals. Hazard criterion 7 is acutely toxic to aquatic organisms. And hazard criterion 8 is persistence in soil and water. Hazard criterion 9 is dioxins. And hazard criterion 10 is heavy metals. That's the GHS 10 hazard criteria. And those also 4 and the HCA 10 hazard criteria. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie. I've told you, Debbie knows her stuff when it comes to herbicides. I think the guys who got the extension to next year, September, are sighing a bit of a relief to get all those packaging changes, but it can't happen too soon. You just heard what she said about the rate through cotton of certain pesticides. Any questions for Debbie? There we go.
Debbie, with the demise of our favorite people here in KZN, what do we do in terms of replacing things like put gel, etc.? Because none of this is available here anymore. I mean, we've gone back to having to use the dicamba combinations. Yeah, exactly. Because you can't get any of the other stuff. So it doesn't matter whether you go to a coastal co-op or whether you go to, or any of the farmer co-ops, or whether you go to, what's the other place? Can't remember the name now. You just can't get the safer stuff because of UPC's demise. UPL's demise, which I'm very happy about. I'm very happy they're demised. But the reality of it is that it's put those of us who are using these products with some knowledge. I mean, Kilomax. I can't get Kilomax. Can't get Seismic. So what do we do now?
That question I'm going to have to get back to you on because, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do. Because, yes, with that whole drama disaster, we are facing a little bit of a conundrum here because, unfortunately, most of the safer products were UPL products.
And everything else has hiked their prices. All that stuff, but you've got to use more of. I mean, the prices are just insane.
Yeah, no. Unfortunately, for us, it's gonna hit us all. I'm also currently, I sit on the RT12 specs committee, specification committee, and we're currently looking at what we're going to do with the next RT12. So I can't talk about that, but hopefully we'll come up with a plan.
Over there, sir.
Okay, sorry, Mike Pace from Younger Services. Just on the UPL question, it was their warehouse that was looted and burnt, not their factory. So the products that ladies talked about are still available in KZN. I currently have stocks of all those products you're talking about. So I don't know about where to try to source the products, but UPL are in production, and those products are still currently available in South Africa.
Thank you for that information. Maybe you two can get together at lunch and have a chat. In front of you, please, Warren.
Good day. I'm Lenny from Country Line. Oh, okay. Thought you were going to discuss how we were going to advise about the biocontrol of polyphagous short-haul borer.
Oh, yes, I can tell you about that quickly. The biocontrol or the biopesticide for shuttle borer, it is available. I can put you in contact with Paul Barker from the City of Cape Town. They are doing some amazing trials at the moment. And the biocontrol, or let's call it the biopesticide or biosolutions for shuttle borer is looking amazing.
Okay, but just to stress that he's in the trial phase.
Oh, no, these are registered.
Oh, they're registered.
They are
okay.
registered,
All right.
yeah.
But they're busy doing trials, so they're not sure if it's going to work on all species of trees or...
They're looking at the list of reproductive...
I just don't want to create false hope.
No, they're looking at the list of reproductive trees, and it is registered, and they're doing the trials to see on which trees they're working, which trees they're going to be successful on, and they've had success on Acinagunda and the oaks.
Fantastic. Okay, there we go. Right. Any more questions for Debbie before we break for lunch?
One right on that side.
I'm here all day.
She gets paid to be here.
Hi everyone, Colette James from Ezavelo. I just wanted to find out what organisms are you using for biocontrol agents?
Organisms.
Yes.
A various amount, various things. There's leaf feeders, there's leaf feeders, there's moths, there's cerambycids, there's beetles, there's a whole bunch of things, depending on what agent you're looking at and what plant species you're looking for.
Shuttle borer.
Or are you referring to shuttle borer?
No, just...
Oh, yeah.
Just general.
Lace bugs, yeah, there's a whole range. Come speak to me.
Biocontrol's coming. Mrs. Biocontrol's about to be here.
Oh, no, and also we have a new biocontrol agent. Pendele, please stand up.
Where's Pendele?
And Zipazoke, please stand up. Okay, we have a biocontrol agent for KZN now, Pindele Shengasi, Wave. And Zipozonke is her intern Wave. There's your contact for biocontrol in KZN.
They are here as agents, they're not the agent themselves, just in case there was confusion. Right, Debbie, thank you so much. We've got one more, and then we're going to be breaking for lunch.
Hi Debbie, you're speaking to Nandamiso from Etsia. Just out of interest, you mentioned public participation earlier on when you were speaking about your pesticide management policy. I think you said 2010 or not sure, I missed the year. But I want to know on what level of public participation do you guys engage in? Because you didn't mention much, I think.
We sent out the policy into our sort of usual communication lines for comment, and then we amend accordingly, and this sort of public participation I'm referring to. So we sort of give these sort of talks on our pesticide policy, and I do a lot of webinars for the pesticide. I'm on a pesticide discussion forum where I give talks on pesticides, and I'm on SADC, and I give international discussion. I'm on an international discussion forum where I give talks on pesticides as well. So there's a whole range of this sort of stuff.
Send me an email and I'll make sure she gets stuff.
And I'll put you on my discussion group if you like.
There we go. Debbie's contact details on the top over there, so give her a call at any time, send her a WhatsApp. Debbie, thank you so much. Always informative, always knows exactly what's going on. So